Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mob coming at you with another APUSH video. We're continuing our look at topic 6.10, development of the middle class. Last time we talked about some important changes that are going to be happening in American life as we get to the late 19th century, early 20th century, and a lot of those changes, as we'll look today, are going to be focusing in on the growing urbanization of America. Now we know that, urban life is going to start to grow tremendously due to the Industrial Revolution. And as more folks are, going to be seeing factories built, as we're going to start to see more skyscrapers being built, as we're going to start to see more immigrants coming to these big cities, you're going to start to see, very, very, very big, crowded, densely populated areas. And as these big cities like New York and Chicago and Boston and Philly and even Cincinnati begin to swell, we're going to start to see some effects of that. And one of those effects is going to be the growth of what we're going to start to call suburbs. And suburbs are going to be these communities that are going to be kind of popping up, kind of serving as a ring surrounding the core of an urban area. They may technically be within the city limits of a big city like Cincinnati. They may be just outside the city limits of a big city. But during this time period, these are going to be communities that are going to be anywhere from, 5 to 10 miles away from the core of that urban area. In other words, downtown. Now, when we talk about why these suburbs are going to start to pop up, well, there's many. As downtown urban areas are going to be more valuable in terms of expensive rental fees, to be in that close proximity to what's going on downtown, land in the suburbs is going to be much cheaper, much more widely available. So if you are someone that is looking for maybe a little better deal on a piece of property, move 5, 6, 7 miles out from the downtown area. You're going to have a lot more options. Keep in mind that if you move out to that suburban area, you're talking about home ownership on your own plot of land, as the urban areas are starting to swell more and more with crowded apartments, tenements. You could have a suburban home of your own, on your own piece of land. Something else that is going to be fueling this suburban movement is the growth of the infrastructure via railroads, streetcars, subways, things like that. Because, it's one thing to be able to live outside the city, but these folks are working in the city. They're working downtown, and you've got to be able to have a relatively quick way to get there on a daily basis. If you take a look at this map of Cincinnati at the turn of the 20th century, and I'll kind of move myself over to the side here, you can see, downtown Cincinnati right here along the river. But as you see these lines that are kind of extending out like tentacles away from the downtown core, you're going to see these are streetcar lines. They're going to be able to start to connect some of these other neighborhoods that are going to start to move further and further out from downtown, these suburban areas, places like Walnut Hills, Hyde Park, Oakley, Norwood, St. Bernard, Westwood over here. You're going to start to see more and more of these folks willing to move out to these places to enjoy the benefits of living outside the urban area, where the grass is green and the air is a little less polluted, and it's less densely populated and a little less crime and things like that, but still be able to enjoy the benefits of downtown, not just for employment, but all the leisure activities that are going to be growing as well. Also, making suburban life more possible is going to be mass production of homes. When we think of mass produced goods, we might think of things like shoes or steel or ammunition and things like that. But you can apply that to building homes, and if you can do that with building homes, homes are a little bit cheaper, so more available for more people, more popularity for suburban growth. Note also that something though there is some insidious aspects of this. A lot of this is also driven by, well, racism. More waspish Americans that were born in America. Parents were born in America, grandparents born in America, etc. A lot of these folks, as we've learned, they're not happy with this growing diversity of America along ethnic, racial, religious lines in these big cities. They're not big fans of the growing Italian Catholic population, the Russian Jewish population, the Chinese population, etc. And as the urban areas, the densely urban areas are starting to become more diverse, well, if you move out to suburbs, you don't have that same cultural diversity, which, unfortunately, there were many middle-class to wealthy white folks that's what they wanted. They didn't want that diversity. So that's going to make suburban life more attractive in that way. And note, as we start to see the growth of these very first early suburbs in American history, it's going to start to go hand in hand with what we are defining as the quote-unquote American dream. And this is going to extend really in many respects to this very day. The idea that you could own a little piece of property of your own, build your own home on it, a little white picket fence, your kids, your dog, your cat, the ability to kind of have something that's yours, something that you can hang your hat on as an example of physical manifestation of your success, of your independence. That's going to start to become defined or intertwined with that, if you will. Now, as suburban areas are starting to become more popular, as we said, in many respects, it is a response to many of the perceived and, let's be honest, real downsides of urban life in this time period. And, if you look at, the 1860s and 70s and, even before the Civil War, as big cities are starting to get larger and larger, they didn't really do a good job in terms of health and cleanliness for those urban communities. A lot of folks died of cholera back in the day. You didn't have, sanitation treatment centers. You didn't have regular garbage pickup. These were pretty gross places. But as we start to get into the turn of the 20th century, and a lot of this is going to be fueled by the burgeoning progressive movement, which we'll talk about later, you're going to start to see some big cities do things that are going to make urban life more habitable for those that are going to be living in these cities. And still, though, most Americans are now going to start to be living in these dense urban cores. So we are going to start to see wastewater treatment facilities. We are going to start to see regular garbage pickup. We know that in these areas where there's a lot of poverty, we know that crime tends to follow poverty. And so with these, larger and larger, numbers of incidents of crime, well, in response to that, you're going to start to see actual professionally trained police officers starting to emerge in these big cities. Traditionally, fire was a big problem, especially, pre-industrial revolution. You have a lot of, wooden buildings in very tight, close proximity with one another. One of these buildings goes up in flames, the whole neighborhood goes up in flames. We saw Chicago, half the city of Chicago nearly burned down in a fire during the Gilded Age. Well, you're going to start to see professionally trained fire departments beginning to emerge. Something else that's going to start to make the urban areas more habitable is the emergence of zoning laws. What zoning laws do are create areas of cities that are designated for certain specific areas. We generally define property or territory, I guess I should say, in one of three categories typically. It is commercial, residential, and industrial. Residential areas, kind of makes sense. That's where people would live, houses, apartments, whatever. Commercial areas are areas where you would see businesses be located. And industrial, as it would probably make sense, this is where you would see factories be located. And the idea behind that is, if you want to have a place to live that is going to have some value to it, a place that is going to be, more habitable, you don't want to be living right next to a slaughterhouse. You don't want to be living right next door to a steel mill. You want to create these corridors of industrial areas, which, are going to be, especially during those time periods, pretty gnarly, pretty nasty, pretty dirty, pretty polluted. but at least you kind of keep them in an isolated part of the city, away from where people are going to be, going to bed every night. And you connect these residential areas through, commercial zones. For example, in our area, if you go along Route 22 and 3 and around Route 48, those are commercial zones in our school district. And residential zones are just kind of off those commercial zones. Little Miami doesn't really have much industrial zoning in it particularly, but there is a little bit of an industrial zone core over on Grandin Road, just west of Route 48, east of the Little Miami River. If some of you that might have heard of Sumco, that's kind of where there's a little bit of an industrial area in the Little Miami School District. We also started to see a reaction to what was a common complaint with, more and more urbanites. As these big cities become more and more developed, it starts to lose its connection with the natural world. It begins to be completely paved over with, concrete and asphalt and brick, and you don't see things that you used to normally see in your life, like trees and, places where you could actually connect with nature. It's starting to become truly an urban concrete jungle. And in response to that, you're going to see, more and more urban planners promote the use of creating parks. Ways for folks to connect back to nature. It helps to cut down on pollution. It's a way to kind of escape from, some of the pollutants of living in an urban area. They're healthier zones for folks to be, spending their time. And the most famous of these, of course, is going to be in New York City, right in the middle of Manhattan. Frederick Law Olmsted is going to be crafting Central Park. And if you've never been to Manhattan, Manhattan is this big, giant island. It's about 8 miles long, about 1.5 miles wide. And if you've ever been there, you can see even from this picture, it really is an island of skyscrapers. That's really what it is. It's this totally urban island, mostly dotted by skyscrapers. But what they've done is right in the middle of this island of urbanization, they've built this massive, beautiful park, which connects the city together. It almost provides lungs, for this big, giant, vast city. And New Yorkers, certainly today could not live without Central Park. And for many of us, closer to home in Cincinnati, we think of things like Sharon Woods, and we think of Eden Park and many other places as, absolutely indispensable. Now, some other important things to keep in mind are going to be focusing in on changes in education and an increase in leisure time, but we'll get into more of those topics next time. All right, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.